Hi, I'm Graham from Blackmagic Design, and we've got some exciting things to show you today. Now, we've been working hard to introduce a new generation of converters. We've also dramatically reduced the cost of other models of converters, so we'd like to show them to you today. Now, when it comes to converters, one of the main overriding problems we're trying to solve here is both waste and complexity. We've got really too many models of converters for the same conversion. The range of our converters has grown over the years as we've released new models, and technologies have changed. So we've got some thoughts on how we could solve the problem. We've got some new models with better features and they're lower cost, but we've also got some new price points of other models. And so we also think we've got some new, less wasteful ways of buying converters too. We've been adding some new manufacturing capability that makes all this possible, and it's been a lot of work. It's taken over a year to do, and there's always more we can do, but it's made a big difference. And so it's really been underpinning everything we're doing here. So let's get started, and I'll show you the first new model that I'd like to talk about. Now, we've got two new models of mini converters, SDI to HDMI and HDMI to SDI. We've got a 4K model and a HD model. So what we've built is we've built a new model to replace them. It's a new 6G model, and I've got it here. This new 6G models are cheaper than the HD models they replace. The new 6G models are also a newer design, so they've got more features. But just because they're low cost doesn't mean that we really stop. We sort of exist to make television products more affordable. It's what we do. It's the reason we started the company. So, we've got now Ultra HD models that are lower cost than the HD models, and I think that's a big thing. So this model is the model. This is the mini converter SDI to HDMI. It's the model that's used for conversion for monitoring. It's also the big model with most features, and so there's a bit more to show you. Actually, I'm going to show you a few features of this model. But this is the one that can turn a flat screen TV or a video projector into SDI monitors. Professional SDI monitoring can be quite demanding to do well, so this converter is packed with features that make it a lot more than a basic converter, and it's able to do these tasks really well. Now, of course, this model converts from SDI to HDMI, so it can be used for turning televisions into broadcast monitors. You can feed SDI to projectors. We feed SDI up to projectors in the roof by using converters on either end, so we don't have to run we've got that problem of long HDMI cables, so we solve that. Also, it converts the SDI output of for like devices up into large screen on-set monitoring. So, that's also useful. And digital signage, some devices have HDMI inputs. So this can also handle that task, and you can get them integrated into SDI. Now, it's a very compact design. It's got adjustments via mini switches or USB. Now the switch functions are printed on the bottom, so you can see it there. So you don't need the manual to change the settings, which is important when you're on location. Now, you can also change settings on those small switches. In fact, there they are there. But also, some of the settings are done via USB. So I can show you that how that works before we get started, so I can then show you some of the other features. So what I'll do is I'll plug in the USB, and it'll detect the converter, and I'll power it up. So I'll put the converter there. I've got some power, and I've got my USB cable. And the USB cable is plugged into this computer here. So I'll plug that in. Now you can see as soon as I plug that in, it instantly detected this converter. And so you can make settings and adjustments, and I can quickly show you that. So you just log into the converter, and there's some settings for LUTs, and there's some analog adjustments, even the software version. So the other thing that happens is that if the converter needed a firmware update, then you would have seen that it would have come up with a box asking you to download new firmware. Now, it means we can add new television formats as the TV systems evolve, all via USB. Now, the Blackmagic converter utility supports all converter models. So you just have to have the one utility. And the converter utility also runs on both Windows and Mac OS. So it's platform agnostic. You can always download the latest version of this utility from our website because we're constantly adding new features. Now, using the converters is easy. It's a simple SDI to HDMI converter. So I'll do that. So we'll just plug in some SDI, which we've got here. And I've got a HDMI cable for this TV here. Now, this television is the cheapest HDMI TV we could find. And so we wanted to show that even on a low-cost TV, you can still get some really nice-looking pictures from SDI. But this converter works with any HDMI, Ultra HD, HD, or SD TV or projector. So it'll monitor the SDI input and instantly switch. So you don't have to worry about changing any switches when the standards changes. The moment the SDI input's detected that it's changed standards, it'll change. There's also, it'll automatically detect between SD, HD, and Ultra HD and all the formats. It supports all the formats like SD, 720p, 1080p, 1080i and 2160p Ultra HD up to 2160p 30 because it's a 6G SDI converter. So that means it supports all the SDI rates from 270 megabit all the way for SD, all the way to 1.5G, 3G and 6G SDI for HD and Ultra HD formats. That 3G SDI input, as I was saying, automatically detects the video standard, including level A and level B SDI inputs when you're running in 3G. So so there's a bunch of features in the converter I'd like to talk about. And in fact, I'll show you them on this model because they're quite fascinating. Like it's got a built-in Ultra HD to HD down converter. So what this means is you can monitor Ultra HD SDI on a HD television. And this is actually a HD television. And at the moment, I'm actually feeding it HD. So unlike HDMI, there's really not much you can do about SDI when you get pixels down the cable. The advantage of SDI is that the data just comes down the cable. But you got to basically take the source as it comes in. With HDMI, the device talks down to HDMI to work out what the standard is. So what that means is we just have to take the video standard that's given to us with SDI. So if it's Ultra HD, you won't see anything on a regular HD television, which I've got here. So the built-in down converter solves that problem because it can detect the video input and just fix it. So what I'll show you how this works. So I've got a HD television, and you can see I've got a HD source currently connected from the Teranex over here. So this light's illuminated saying it's 1080. So if I change that to Ultra HD and change the format, now the Teranex will change over to Ultra HD, which the source is actually Ultra HD, that Teranex. And what's happened is the converter's actually now seen that the SDI input's Ultra HD. It knows that the TV cannot do Ultra HD, so it's used the down converter to take care of it. So you can see there's still an image there, and the converter has taken care of that mismatch, and it's made Ultra HD just display on a HD TV. So that means you can entrust the converter to be intelligent and help you solve problems like this. So it really just works to make sure that whatever comes in, it tries to take care of it. Now, one of the other features we've got, which is also cool to show, is HDMI Instant Lock. This mini converter SDI to HDMI 6G also features our HDMI Instant Lock feature, which only the top-end converters we've had in the past do. So HDMI devices like projectors and televisions can take a long time to lock to a HDMI source when it changes. I think really in many ways the HDMI standard was just designed to connect DVD players to televisions. It's a fantastic video standard. The problem is it can take like 5 seconds or more sometimes before you see an image. And so that's a real problem. So HDMI Instant Lock solves this problem by maintaining the connection to the device. So what that means is when the input changes, the SDI input changes, in the same format, it has to be the same format, the picture will instantly lock. So you can unplug and plug in the SDI, or you can be routing different sources from a router and it just works. Even if you're just putting routing between sources on a router of different timings, it'll retime and work it all out. So you can turn the HDMI Instant Lock on and off using the switches. So what I'll do is I'll show you, I can change sources on this, feeding this converter, and I'll show you how it works. When HDMI Instant Lock's on, it's like a clean switch router. But let's see what happens when HDMI Instant Lock's turned off. And currently on this converter, it's turned off. So what you can see is when I change between sources, there's a delay to lock. And what I'll do is I'll go over to the router and I'll switch a different source. So I've got, and you see there's a delay. In fact, what I've got over here on the computer, I've got that was one of our Video Hub switches. Over here on the computer, I've actually got a Video Hub control panel so I can switch different sources. And you can see when I change between sources, it takes some time for the video to lock. So HDMI Instant Lock will fix that. So the switch for HDMI Instant Lock is on the converter is switch 1. So what I'll do is I'll take a small screwdriver and I'll set HDMI Instant Lock on, which I've just done. And now I'll use the software. I've got this computer connected via Ethernet to the router, so I can just change the sources here. So as I change the sources, you'll now see that the television is instantly locking to those sources. And as I move between the sources, you can see that it keeps up. Now, no matter how fast I change the sources, the image is instantly locked, and I can do it fast. So as I'm changing between sources, it's basically maintaining the lock, and it's really just very much like the clean switch router. But that's not a clean switch router, that's just a regular router. Now, in this case, all the sources are Ultra HD sources, so the down converter is actually being used as well as the instant lock, and they're working together. So it's pretty exciting. Now, one of the other powerful features the mini converter SDI to HDMI 6G has, it's got two full 33-point 3D LUTs built in. Now, 3D LUTs are generally used by the film industry, and they cost a lot of money. But 3D LUTs are also great for matching color science to specific standards, and I think they're a really important thing to put in a monitor. You can use 3D LUTs to calibrate cheap broadcast monitors, cheap LCD monitors to make them look like broadcast monitor calorimetry. Now, the converter stores two 3D LUTs internally, and you can select which LUT's on or off by some switches. You can also upload your own LUTs in the cube file type, and you can save color grades in DaVinci Resolve as 3D LUTs and load them. So you could actually use DaVinci Resolve to do color matching, and then you could just save that grade as a LUT. There's also a switch to allow the LUT to output on the SDI output. So what that means is you can make the converter an SDI to SDI 3D LUT processor. So that's also pretty exciting. Now, what I'll do is I'll show you how the 3D LUT works. So let's enable enable LUT 1 on the switches. So I'll grab the little screwdriver. Now, on the bottom of the converter, LUT 1, if I look, the labeling is on the bottom. And if I look, LUT 1 is switch 6 off. Let's do that. And also, let's and you've got to turn on the 3D LUT. So enable the 3D LUT to switch 7 on. So I'll do that. There it is. So you should have seen the pictures go black and white. Now, what that means is I've got a black and white 3D LUT loaded. Now, what this LUT does is it sends each source RGB channel to all the output channels. 3D LUTs are really are able to mix all the color channels in any combination. So that's why the 3D LUTs are so powerful, is they can really do a full image transform. However, you can load any LUT you like via the USB connection. And if you look at the utility again, I can show you how to load a LUT we have. So I'll go back into the converter utility. I'm still connected to it. Over here, you can see I've got the monochrome LUT, which is LUT 1. So I'll load a new LUT. And in fact, I've got a HDR LUT here that I'll load. And I'll open that. And it'll then save. And you should be able to see that the what's happened is the colorimetry has changed, and the because that's a HDR LUT. So in fact, I can turn that back off again so we can go back to normal pictures. And you'll see there's been a change in colorimetry. So it's very powerful what you can do with 3D LUTs. And you can load any 3D LUT you like. Now, another powerful feature this converter's got is it's got the redundant SDI inputs. We've had this on a lot of our converters for a long time. It lets you run two independent cables to the converter. This is very important on this model of converter because often it's up in where video projectors are. So you could run two cables up to the converter. If one of the cables is damaged, the second cable is switched in automatically. Now, this is really critical for projectors at venues and churches and conference centers where you've got a lot of crowd around. The crowd, it's possible for cables to be damaged by those crowds as people just, they can grab things and everything like that. So you can actually run two separate cable routes, and that way you've got a lot of redundancy if something gets damages one of the cables. This converter, when it sees one of the inputs plugged in, it'll obviously lock to it. But if you have another input plugged in, it'll then switch to it if the first input disappears. So what I'll do is I can see how we can do that. So I'll plug in a second source. I've got another one here. It's the same source. So I'll plug it into the alternate SDI input, as you can see here. And now they're both there. And as I unplug the first source, you can see the pictures just stay there. So I can plug that back in again. And then I can unplug the alternate source. And so you can see how the now there's two cables, both, the image doesn't go away. I can unplug either one. As long as I've got one of the cables plugged in, the pictures just stay the same. So I think that's a really powerful feature. It's something that a lot of people have said they really like about our converters, and we've had that. So the mini converters, it's great to keep that feature in there. Now, of course, audio is a big thing, and the mini converter SDI to HDMI 6G has some powerful audio features as well. It includes multiple audio outputs, not just audio on the HDMI output, which it's got, but it's not, in many ways, it's not only a sort of an SDI to HDMI converter, but it's also a pro audio de-embedder. You can use it for both. The audio has output on the HDMI as independent outputs, but it's also output on the side here on two balanced analog outputs that can be switched to AES EBU as well. The analog output is balanced. It's on standard balanced jack connectors, so you can use cables from audio stores. And when it's switched to digital audio, then the audio is AES EBU for all the pro digital audio gear. So, of course, you can change the audio output. It can be done on switch 8 on the little switches on the side. That's where you can switch it on for AES EBU or off for analog. You can also adjust the levels in the utility for analog levels, which I can show you. If we go back to the utility, I'll open back up the converter again. I'll click the audio page, and you can see over here, there's adjustments for the analog channels, and there's also adjustments for the digital channels as well, which can be useful, just worth having. The other thing you can do is you can lower the audio down, and you can then plug in some of these little adapters. Lets you use RCA hi-fi audio. So if I plug those in the side, I've now got RCA outputs, which you can use for feeding consumer amplifiers and other kind of consumer gear as well. Lots of consumer amplifiers also accept HDMI audio, but you can do both because not everything does. Now you can also, on the bottom of the converter, you can select the channel numbers you want. It doesn't just de-embed audio out of channels 1 and 2, you can also make it out of any audio group in the SDI, and there's 16 channels of audio on SDI. For example, if you change to outputs 15 to 16, you'd pick up the talkback if you were using one of our switches. There's a table on the bottom of the converter that shows you what the different channel numbers are, so you don't have to know how to count in binary because there's different audio channels actually set for you there, so you can see which ones to use. You can look up the audio channels and just de-embed from any pair from those switches. So even if you don't need HDMI video, you've still actually got a full audio de-embedder, which can be very powerful. Now, with the converter, there's a power supply included, which has got outputs 12 volt. You can use any 12 volt power supply. It's a very standard connection, so you can find power supplies from anywhere. The power connector is very common. So it's if you're in an emergency and you're out on location somewhere, it really gives you a lot of flexibility to grab any power supply you can find. There's a cable tie point still there, so you can tie down the power cable if you need to. It's a very powerful converter. And the thing I like about this new model is it's a new modern design. It's completely rebuilt from the ground up as a new SDI to HDMI model. It's got these powerful features such as the SDI Ultra HD to HD down converter. It's got 2 built-in 3D LUTs. It's got the HDMI instant lock. It's got the redundant SDI inputs. It's got separate HDMI balanced analog audio and AS-EBU audio outputs. This model is much more than a basic converter. It's got a lot of this processing built in, so it's a wonderful new model, I think. And the great thing is this new mini converter SDI to HDMI is cheaper than the HD model it replaces. It'll be available from today, and it's $185 retail. So I think it's a really, really nice model. Now, of course, that means we've got the other way around. So we've got also what we're showing today is the mini converter HDMI to SDI model, which is its sort of twin brother. But this is the model it's used for converting consumer HDMI products to SDI. So it's also the model it's used to convert computer outputs to SDI for broadcast graphics, or for, in fact, we're using it here. We've got the output of the computer plugged into a switcher. So what this means, its core function is really converting from HDMI to SDI. It doesn't have the 3D LUTs and down converter, that the other model has, because it doesn't really need it, because you can change the computer settings to match what you want. But this is the model. It does convert computers to SDI. It's great for extending, HDMI cables, because you can use it to convert to SDI and feed quite long distances. It's also great for consumer HDMI devices, like for live production switches and things like that. You can really convert all those HDMI devices to SDI. The other thing you can do is you can convert Skype, like we have sometimes used full screen Skype things. And you can play, like you can bring the other person up full screen in Skype and convert that computer's output to SDI. And this is a great way of essentially using Skype as a video link for interviews and things like that. And also system integrators and CCTV people can use it as well. So it's I'll show you. I'll plug it in. Look, it's very easy to use, just like the other model is. It works with any HDMI computer or camera. We're going to make it work with this one. It doesn't work with encrypted HDMI sources because obviously for copyright reasons we're not allowed to do that. But it'll watch the HDMI input and it'll instantly switches standards when it changes. There's no need to change the settings when moving between SD, HD, and Ultra HD. It just supports it all automatically. Like the other model, it supports all SD, 720p, 1080, 1080i, and 2160. So it supports all the SDI data rates as well, from 270 megabit, 1.5G, 3G, and 6G SDI. You can also select on the input whether you want it, in the output, whether you want to output 3G SDI level A or level B. So I'll plug this in as well. What I'll do is I'll use this converter to convert from the computer to the converter here. So you can see the computer view up on here. So I've got myself a nice little SDI cable, and I've got another power cord here, which I'll plug in, and that powers up the converter, and I'll feed the output. In fact, I've got the HDMI from here. I've got a split off running here, so I'll plug my HDMI into the converter. Now the converter is converting this computer here to SDI, and I just plug in one of the outputs across from here, and I'll unplug my sources here because I don't need those anymore, and I'll plug this in instead. Now what I'm doing is I'm converting the HDMI out of the computer into SDI and the SDI out into here. So almost all computers have HDMI out, so they work at television resolutions, and you can change that on the computer. So what we're doing here is we're using the converter that we have for monitoring that we'd already hooked up before, and we can simply select the format on the computer. Now, I'm not going to do that, but basically you can change that setting in the computer control panel to allow it to change different frame rates and different resolutions. You can make it work with Ultra HD or HD here. Computers can support multiple resolutions, so you can really get any format you like. And when you've done that, it'll then feed out of here and feed into there, and I've got it up on the television there. So it's I mean, that's as easy as it is. It's a it's a HDMI to SDI converter. Now, some of the other features this model has, it also supports the HDMI, the Blackmagic converter utility, just like any other model. So I can plug. In fact, I can show you that. I'll just detour a little, and I'll unplug that. And if you look at the converter there, and you can see I plug back into there, and now it's detected the HDMI to SDI model. So I can also change the settings there. You can also select the audio you want to embed in using the switches on the bottom. So you can also define what audio channels you'd like the audio embedded into. You can also source the audio from the HDMI input, or you can there's also bounced audio connections on the side. So you can take the audio from bounced analog or the ASEBU digital audio. You can also do the same thing. We can change the audio adjustment and use the jack connectors to get hi-fi source for audio, which can be good for computer audio. If you've got a computer audio output and you don't have audio on the HDMI, you've got the separate audio channels in. So just to summarize that model, it's a little bit simpler because it doesn't need quite the same features when you're doing the monitoring function of SDI to HDMI, but it's still a very powerful converter. It's a full 6G SDI, HDMI to SDI converter. It's got features like the automatic switching between SD, HD, and Ultra HD, up to 2160p 30. It's got separate HDMI, balanced and analog and AES audio outputs. And even if you don't need the conversion, it's wonderful just to be able to convert audio into an SDI feed. So this model is also cheaper than the HD model it replaces. It'll be available today at $145, and that's started shipping today. So obviously there's a wide range of converters from Blackmagic Design. These include SDI distribution, analog conversion, optical fiber, and much more. So check out the range of converters. We even have rack mount Terranex Mini converters that handle 12G SDI. The Terranex Minis also add support for a front panel with LCD and menus, so you can do quite a lot of features there. So the last big thing we'd like to talk about is our microconverters. One of the big issues we've worked on is our manufacturing efficiency, and one of the reasons we started to do that is that like I said before, Blackmagic Design was started to make the television industry more affordable. We worked in television, and that's what we originally wanted to do. I wanted to help my friends start television facilities themselves, and it was difficult because the equipment was so expensive. So, but at the same time, you could buy low-cost stuff, but it was often very poor quality. So, what we wanted to do is really help transform the industry, and I think we've done very well at that. Some of our friends have done extremely well out of the products that we've built, and some have done less well, but some have done very, very well. And it's, in many ways, it's all about creativity. That's the thing we've really, in some ways, been trying to do. We've been trying to make the creativity the important part of the TV industry. In some ways, by making equipment less important, what you have is creativity, and that's the thing that really defines who does well out of the TV industry. So I think it's been very exciting. So obviously, we're also learning all the time how we can do more to learn and how we can be better at what we do. And one of the areas we've been working very heavily on is manufacturing. And so we've been adding some exciting new capabilities over the last year, and now you're going to see some of the benefits of all that work. But the other big thing we've been thinking about too is waste. It's been bothering me a little. We recently had a major broadcaster buy 250 of our microconverters, and they didn't need the power supplies, so they sort of gave us the power supplies back. But we didn't really want to waste them. Well, they didn't want to waste them. We didn't want to waste them either. But it's hard for us to use them because they're now secondhand, so we can't sell them as new. So we started sort of checking with people, and I think the big thing is we wanted to. A lot of people didn't need the power supplies. We're kind of generating a lot of waste by including a power supply with each converter. So what this means is we wanted some options to buy the converter without the power supply. Our microconverters have been very popular, and I've got them here. And while they don't have, all the powerful features like down conversion, they're very simple, and that makes them very popular. And what's also exciting is they use USB power supplies. Now, that's the same USB power supply used on smartphones. So you can just plug a smartphone power supply in. But what makes of course, it's very common. These power supplies are everywhere. But also, televisions have USB ports often, and you can power the converters from those. Also, the microconverter SDI to HDMI can direct power from the television, so it's a complete self-contained solution when you attach it to the back of the television. In a similar way, the microconverter HDMI to SDI model can power from the computer. That adds SDI out, to the output of the computer, and it can use the computer's battery to power it. So it's a complete, wonderful, self-contained model. So we're releasing the two models without the power supplies. They're in a much smaller box, and it eliminates the waste of the power supplies. but also it means that we can produce them at a lower cost. So the new prices for the versions of the microconverters without the power supply, the microconverter HDMI to SDI model is now lower at $39 only. And the microconverter SDI to HDMI model will now only be $45. Of course, you can still purchase the microconverters with a power supply, and those packs are around about $10 more. The microconverter HDMI to SDI model with the power supply will now be $55, and the microconverter SDI to HDMI with the power supply will now be $59. So we think most people will buy them without the power supply, but because a lot of times they'll have power supplies they already around, like that broadcaster did, or from phones, or they'll be powering them from devices like computers. So we think these microconverters are a great choice for really affordable SDI conversions. They're high quality. They switch between all SD and HD standards up to 1080p 60, and the lower cost models of the microconverters are available from today. So the final word on these microconverters, I think they're also a fantastic solution to getting computers connected up into projectors, and really in some ways you can use SDI now as an extension of HDMI. So we're pretty excited to be able to make them even more affordable. And of course, it's what we do. This is the big thing that we're into. Now people can use, if they can convert consumer cameras to SDI and do switching and other cool things. So that's all we have today. We hope these new products really help you build a facility. We think these converters will be really popular because they're useful in so many areas. They're just so commonly used. Like I was saying, with switches and getting cameras in, from HDMI to SDI for lower cost cameras. I think it makes it really cheap to use computer outputs as graphic sources. We had some people using computers out for at-home graphic sources, and they were using a green background, and they're keying that in the chroma key, and they're getting some wonderful graphics just on the HDMI out with overlay and everything. So it was really, really nice to see that. Monitoring is now a lot cheaper with the new powerful SDI to HDMI mini converter 6G. So look, again, we'd like to thank everyone for the support, that you give us. We don't like emailing you all the time because it's annoying. But that also means, that following us on Twitter and Facebook is a really good idea. So you can learn about software updates. We do a lot of software updates that add features, and all the products generally are upgradable. So please follow us on those platforms so you can get notified of new updates without us sort of bugging you with emails. But also, you want to make sure you get some of those updates. Like we recently added some wonderful scopes to the VideoSys 4K model, and they were a free update. So if you keep on top of that, you can get new features. Generally, they're all for free. So we hope to see you soon and get some feedback on what we've done. And take care, and thanks for watching.